What is good, people, and welcome back to another edition of That Transfer Show. It's episode 4. I'm joined once again by Rod. He's just about to fuck off on another 2-week vacation. So it's a good job we got him here. How are you doing, Rod?
Not too bad, bro. Life's a movie, what can I say? But yeah, I'm good. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm good. Life's a roller coaster, brother. But yeah, Rod, we've had a bit more transfer news since the last episode, so I'm excited to jump straight back into it with you. I think we should probably start off with probably the biggest story out there right now. Kind of came out of the blue. I think a lot of people expected it. After the season, but it didn't actually come out for a while, and now it's just come out. I think it's taken a lot of people by shock, but Cristiano Ronaldo wants out of Manchester United, and I think when you look at the options of clubs that he could potentially be linked with or go to, it's a bit of a weird one. Looking at Bayern Munich, Chelsea and Barcelona, what are your thoughts initially on him coming out that he wants to leave?
As a United fan, bro, there's not a lot of players that want to play for you, which is a bit of a concern. I was speaking to my friend at the weekend, and he was surprised it's taken this long for him to say that he doesn't want to play. But I don't know. I think obviously new manager, like new tactics, new season, etc. I'm a bit confused why he doesn't want to stay. I think there's obviously something building at United, especially if they can get in who it looks like Eriksen, De Jong, etc.
Yeah, well,
but
it came out that he wasn't happy with the sort of, I guess you could say, ambition of the club. And I think that's fair, because I think the targets that we're looking at, I don't think we're looking at ready-made targets. And I think for a player of his age, he kind of needs to get it done now.
No player's bigger than the club, and I think the main driving factor behind him not wanting to be here next year is obviously no Champions League.
Yeah.
But then, obviously Eriksen was never at the same level as Ronaldo, but Eriksen simply just wants to play football now, which I guess the incident last year, or year before, whenever it was, has probably had a bit of a bearing on his decision. But Eriksen just wants to play football. He's not too bothered about Champions League, whereas it looks like Ronaldo's heavily focused. Obviously, he's a winner, etc. But I think if you play for Man United, you're still playing for one of the biggest clubs in world football. So I don't know. This is the part I've never really rated about Ronaldo. I think he's very, very arrogant, and I think he thinks he's bigger than the club.
Okay. I'd like to get your thoughts on the teams that he's kind of being linked with. I put PSG on the thumbnail just because I thought that's one of the only teams that probably could afford him outside of these other three. But Bayern Munich and Barcelona are the other options, which I do kind of see Bayern as a team which would make sense for him to potentially go to the Bundesliga and get a Bundesliga title to add to the Premier League and the Spanish League and Serie A. The other team is Chelsea, though, Rod, and I find this one a bit strange as well, just because of the fact Tuchel, in my opinion, is not doing a great job, especially with the attackers, and I just feel it would be a bit of a strange move for him to go there. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Chelsea is the team that I've seen him most strongly linked to. I don't think he goes to Barca. Barca can't afford him. They can barely afford free transfers, and obviously they're looking at Lewandowski, etc. So I think Barca's completely ruled out. Bayern, maybe. If Lewandowski goes, maybe. But Chelsea, to be honest, I don't think Ronaldo moves at all. I think it's just all a load of smoke. But yeah, Chelsea, I saw that obviously Todd Bowley wants to make a statement, etc. And obviously he's directing transfers at the moment. But I don't think Tuchel would want Ronaldo. I think he stays, to be honest, mate. If he does go, you need to get another striker and spend more money. So I think he stays, to be honest, mate.
Yeah, I think it's kind of hard for United as well right now. If you're looking into the market, I think the two biggest strikers have probably moved on in Nunez and Haaland. I think the only one left would be a Lewandowski, but he looks pretty set to go to Barcelona. So I think United would have to look for someone who's kind of not really being talked about at the moment. I do find it hard to see him go into a Barcelona, a Chelsea, or a PSG. The only one which would make sense for me would be Bayern, but I think they would probably struggle with the wages. Obviously, just brought in Sadio Mane on a big deal. We know Lewandowski is likely to leave, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. But I do think that he's probably going to end up staying at United. I just have this feeling that it is a bit of a weird one, but I just don't know who's really desperate for him. And I was watching Sky Sports and they had some fucking guy on and he was like, oh, everyone's going to be desperate to get their hands on Ronaldo, but they're not. That's just the case. He's kind of, he's past his peak. He's still a good player, but teams are looking to build stuff for the future and you just can't do that with Cristiano Ronaldo. And I do see him probably staying at United for another season before he probably leaves and goes either one last big move, which I'm not sure what it would be, or I see him probably going to somewhere like Sporting.
Obviously, he's in peak athletic ability. He's 37. He's probably still got another year or two left after this year.
Yeah.
I think, to be honest, mate, I see maybe one more year, then he might just retire. I don't know. I think he stays at United this year. I don't see a load of clubs, apart from maybe PSG. They're probably the only one who would spend the money and have the ability to do that. Because I think Ronaldo would, especially in the Premier League, it'd use up a lot of people's FFP movability. So I can't really see many people going in for him.
With PSG as well, though, you've got to think about the fact that they've kind of tied down Mbappe, but he's basically the judge, jury, and executioner at the moment. So it's a bit of a hard one. But for United, sorry, Rod. But for United, they have brought in potentially two players this week. Looks like Malacia is pretty much done. But the one I want to talk about is Christian Eriksen. We was talking about this on Thursday, Rod. But you didn't think it was very likely that he's going to join. I did feel like it was probably going to happen. However, I'm not too sure it's the best move for him. I know you kind of have your, not necessarily worries, but kind of questions about where he fits in with this United squad. Why don't you touch on that?
So, I was thinking about it last night. I think if, say, Ronaldo does go, maybe Bruno could move into that central forward false nine and then Eriksen into the midfield three with maybe De Jong and Fred. But with, say, everyone doesn't move, but you say you bring in Eriksen, bring in De Jong and have the players already that are there, I'm not too sure where he fits in. I don't think he's going to get a load of game time. Obviously, you're in the Europa League, aren't you? Obviously, you've got the domestic competitions, Europa League, the league, 5 substitutions, so rotation. But I'm not really too sure where he fits in. I think Ten Hag likes to play a 4-3-3, and I probably wouldn't put Eriksen in that midfield three.
Okay.
I don't know. Talk to me. I'm not really too sure.
I think there's a couple options here. I think with Eriksen coming in, I think he does offer you something very different to Bruno Fernandes. Like I've said before, I think he's more of an option who is not going to take as risky as a move. I think Bruno tries the hardest thing a lot of times and loses the ball because of that. I think with Eriksen, you're a bit more secured in that midfield. He's less likely to lose possession of the ball. So I think that's going to probably be one of his main jobs coming in, maybe for Bruno every now and then. And especially in some games where you can't really afford to lose the ball if you're not going to have it a lot. I'm thinking about the games against maybe a City and stuff like that. But I think there's options in the team. I think, like you said, with the 5 substitutions, it's going to be massive. I think him coming off the bench potentially or being substituted for Fernandes in some games could be the key. But I also think, like you said, Fernandes, I think, is a very adaptable player. I'm not too sure about seeing him through the middle as a false nine. I think looking at Ten Hag last season, obviously he liked Haller through the middle. He was more of a target man. So I'm not too sure he really fits that description. Maybe as a false nine, as you said. I think maybe in some games that will be an option. But I actually think you could potentially see Fernandes as more of coming into the team in on the wing, but not necessarily as a winger, more as an advanced playmaker. I just see that as kind of an option of him, cutting in a bit and potentially, moving Sancho back over to the right and maybe whoever it is through the middle. That's something I could definitely see happening. But overall, do you think it's a good signing? Because for me, I think on a free, I think the experience that he has, I think it's a good signing. There's a lot of question marks last year after the obviously tragic sort of situation at the Euros. What sort of player is he going to be? And for me, it doesn't really look like anything's really changed. He still looks like a really quality player.
I think it's a great signing. Yeah, absolutely. It's a free transfer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me it's I think it's a good signing. He's 30 years old, which in this obviously he has got a few health conditions, but in this modern age, 30 years old for a player who doesn't really need to be up and down the pitch, who can kind of just float around one area. I think this is still not a young age, but it's still like probably just a bit past their prime.
I think in his case probably is just because of the condition. Like I think in most cases 30-year-old you're probably bang in the middle of that prime, but I think with Eriksen you're probably looking at him as maybe like a 32, 33-year-old.
I think that's fair enough, because obviously I was just thinking in regards to Coutinho, who Villa signed, who's also 30 years of age. So like, I mean, United are adding a quality midfielder to their ranks, and you make a good point. It probably, like, realistically is 31, 32, but still, he's still got the ability. He showed it at Brentford last year, and I think we're not putting enough emphasis on the fact that you can change half your team next year, which is bonkers. Let's minus the goalkeeper, because the goalkeeper never gets subbed, but you can essentially change half your team. So I think we're going to see a lot more game time for these fringe players, and I think Eriksen is going to get enough game time. But I'm not a United fan, I just don't really see where he fits into the side or how he's going to be utilised. But I'm not the manager, so that's not for me to worry about.
Yeah, but I do think it's interesting, like you said. I think adds a lot of depth, especially with Frankie de Jong coming in. I think we're probably still missing another proper number 9, potentially another winger, centre back, and a CDM, but it is what it is. I guess we'll touch on now another move, Rod, a player that you're kind of familiar with. He was linked with Villa for quite a while there. Aaron Hickey has seemingly moved on to Brentford from Bologna, is it? For 22 million euros, which is kind of a big price for Brentford. You don't really see him making too many, splurges in the market. I know this would look kind of like United throwing a penny into a fucking wishing pond or whatever it's called, but for them this is kind of a big money signing. What's your thoughts on this sort of deal, and what do you think so far?
So I think obviously the teams prior to Brentford who were in for him were looking for Hickey to be more of a number 2, getting the essential the occasional game. But obviously Brentford, they're going to give him first team football, and their wing backs are quite important in their style of play, whereas when they attack as with three centre backs, and then when they defend with the 5. So I think for Brentford it's a good signing. He's a good up and coming left back. Obviously Premier League's a completely different ball game. It'd be interesting to see if he can hack it. Obviously still very young, but it's given him some good exposure, and I think Thomas Frank's a good manager to nurture him. He's done it with other young players, and I think he's gonna do quite well. And if he comes into the Premier League at a 4.5 thing on FPL, then I think he's definitely going to be a player to potentially keep your eye on.
I think so as well. I think it's a bit of an interesting one. I think Rico Henry didn't really put a foot wrong for them last season. So to put this sort of money into an investment here is kind of a weird one for me, because I thought they probably would have gone and looked for a bit more of a playmaker in that midfield to start with. But for Aaron Hickey, I think this is a great move. Obviously, moved very young to the Serie A, and I think that was a risky move in his career, but I think it was the right move. I think he's, from what you can see online, he's had a really good time in Italy, and I think for his I guess you could say development, he's done a really good job. I think coming to the Premier League now is probably the right move. I think long term that's probably the league he sees himself in. I think Brentford's probably a great team to move to as well for him, just because of the way they are. I think they're a really well-run club, and I think for him going there, I think he's probably is looking at first team minutes, and I think he's probably going to add quite a bit to Brentford on that left-hand side. And I think, like you said, for fantasy, he could be a decent pickup potentially for the bench, depending on what formation you're going to play. But I really like this signing. I do think it's a tad on the expensive side for Brentford, who have kind of been known to play that sort of money ball sort of system. So it's definitely an interesting one, Rod.
I think, to be fair, they need to add players to the ranks. They need depth, as does every Premier League team. Hence why I think the Premier League has gone quite active in the transfer window so far, and we're only really getting started. We've still got 2 more months of it being open, so you can see teams realising they need to have players to bring on, players to rotate, because it's going to be a busy season with the World Cup, of course, as well.
Yeah, most definitely. And like you said, those 5 substitutions, I think that really kind of changes the game now. I think it's a big kind of progression in football, and we're going to have to see more, dynamic substitutions taking place. And I think, especially teams at the lower end of the Premier League table, I think they're going to struggle, but they're going to have to spend big in order to bring in a squad who can, have options off the bench, like you said. And we'll move on to Leeds. Obviously, I guess it's kind of been a big week for Leeds, losing their sort of hero, I guess you could say, in Calvin Phillips. He's moved on to City, which is a really big move for him in his career. But I guess it's kind of left Leeds a bit stranded. I think they were very light in terms of the squad beforehand, and also now with Phillips and Rafinha looking to leave. Rafinha's definitely going to leave, and Phillips is gone. They're looking to make moves, Rod. Tyler Adams, US international, plays for RB Leipzig, looking to come in for around 20 million. And Sinistra from Feyenoord, a winger, who is looking to come in for around 25 million. I think it's important that they bolster their squad, Rod, and I think they're going in the right way with these 2 signings. Young and potentially it's going to be hard, I think, though, just because they haven't got that Premier League experience coming in.
Yeah, I think the hardest part about bringing in signings is integrating them. I've been talking to my mate who's a big Leeds fan, and he's saying these signings are literally Jesse Marsh signings to fit the system. I think, obviously, Rocker and Adams are going to slot into that CDM role, and then you're going to have Sinistra basically take up the Rafinha role. I think he said they're still looking for a striker, but they are making signings which are going to fit the system quite well. But it's all about how quickly they can gel, how quickly they can integrate into the squad. And obviously, sometimes we see that these players with no Premier League experience take to the Premier League like a duck on water. But I mean, the hardest part is literally integrating them, and your head is going to start to fall if you maybe have a couple bad games, and you can't really afford to do that in the Premier League. But I think Leeds, they're going about it the right way. They're getting in the signings prior to their pre-season games, which I think is vital, gives you as much time as possible to get these players gelled, get them to know their teammates. And it's interesting how they've all played with Jesse Marsh before, bar Rocker, and they've all been part of the Red Bull franchise, which is really raiding them.
I was just going to say, it's interesting that your friend said that, because obviously March working at Leipzig before, and the Adams deal I think is an intriguing one, because I think he's probably about 23 now, US international. I think he's going to have a big role to play. And I think, Leeds now moving on from this Bielsa sort of system, I think it's going to be a big change potentially next year for them. And I think the style of football is going to be overhauled in some way. And I'm actually excited to see what Leeds can do, because I think for them, they had a really strong start in the Premier League under Bielsa. Last year was absolutely shocking. And I think this year they're probably in for a really tough season and an absolute grind to get some points, because I look at their squad right now and I think they are still weak defensively, and I think they didn't really have enough goals in the team up front, so I think it's going to be a real struggle, and I definitely see them in and around that relegation fight.
I think everyone's upgrading. It's going to be interesting to see just how quickly these Leeds players can take to the new system. But I think it's going to be an uphill struggle for them, especially after losing their 2 best players. And we saw Leeds without Phillips last year for the majority of the season. They were a relegation side, and take away Rafinha from that, it's a tricky one. So I am concerned for them. I would be nervous if I'm a Leeds fan, but you never know. The Premier League's full of surprises.
Yeah. Next deal I want to talk about with you, Rod, is Everton, and I want to talk about two signings potentially coming in: Gibbs White, Wolves product, and Broja, who we saw last year at Southampton on loan from Chelsea. I think, first of all, we should probably talk about Gibbs White. I think he's a player who has had game time in the Premier League, but hasn't really shone as much. Obviously, last year he went down to the Championship for some game time. Thoughts on him, first of all?
I think he's just a bit overhyped because he's an English footballer. Not really. I don't know too much about him, so it's hard for me to make a comment. But I mean, if the likes of, no offense, but Everton are in for him, I think it kind of speaks to the caliber of player that he is.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough, Rod. I think, we did see him a couple of years back in that Wolves setup, and I think he came in and he did make some sort of improvements to the team at times, but obviously he couldn't really get a foothold in with, the likes of players that they already had at the club. And I think with Wolves, they do have a very solid sort of midfield setup with Moutinho, who's just signed a 1-year extension, Neves, Dendonka's always done a solid job for them as well. So it's kind of a weird one. But, like you say, I just think it's a bit of a weird signing for Everton. They got Dele Alli now, and I thought they probably would want to start the season with him and kind of persist with him going forward, just because what sort of talent is inside there. You just got to unlock it. So a bit of a weird one. But Broja, I think this is a brilliant signing. I think with Richarlison leaving, definitely leaves a hole in the squad. They were absolutely devastated by injuries last season, and Richarlison kind of led the line for him all year. I think with Calvert-Lewin coming back and hopefully getting back to the form that he showed a couple of years ago, that'll definitely be giving hopes to Everton. But I think Broja coming in as well to potentially create a partnership with him, I think that would be a really interesting one, because I think Broja really shone last year, and I think starting the season, all the talk was on Armstrong and Adams and what they could do together as a partnership. But Broja just took everything away from Armstrong. So it's definitely an interesting one.
Yeah, my opinions on Broja are actually quite mixed. I think he's got the credentials to be a very good footballer. I think he's quite fast, he's quite strong, he's clearly got finishing ability, but I think he was a bit overhyped at Southampton last year. He went on spells of just not doing anything, had some poor games. Obviously, he scored a few goals, but I mean, he was in a poor Southampton team, that I understand, but I think he's a bit overhyped again. Especially because Chelsea will be looking at a hefty fee for him, I imagine.
Yeah.
I'd be probably upwards of 30.
Do you think maybe they'll go for a loan on him? Because I don't think he necessarily gets into the Chelsea sort of...
He doesn't. But as a footballer, probably himself, he's probably fed up a bit of going on loan everywhere. You kind of want to get a move, get settled. I don't know. I think Calvert-Lewin's obviously going to be their talisman next year. Him and Broja up front would be an interesting one, but I don't know if Everton actually go in fully for him. I think they might just... Obviously, Calvert-Lewin has got some injury history, but as an Everton fan, you probably want Broja because of his name. Obviously, he was half decent last year, but for me personally, I think he's a bit overrated. If I just quickly get up some stats now from him.
Well, personally, I do disagree a bit, because I think he had a very good season last year. I think you're talking about goals and that, but I think you look at the impact he made into that Southampton squad, he was definitely missing something. I think, yes, maybe he didn't score as many goals as he probably could have, and maybe they go missing sometimes, but I think the impact that he brought to that sort of team was 100% necessary, and I think without him in that squad, they would have struggled a lot more last year and probably would have been looking at that relegation zone a bit more.
Yeah. I hear that. Just 32 games, 6 goals. But yeah, in that Southampton squad, he did have that impact, and he did hold the ball up, and he did do things well, but I think as a striker, if you bring, especially Everton, say they bring him in for 30, 35 million, you want him to get goals. So,
Yeah,
I don't
well,
know.
I think he did make a lot of bench appearances as well last year. And for me, I think going into that Everton squad, they already have that sort of main goal scorer. I think with Broja, it would be to see what sort of partnership he could probably create with Calvert-Lewin. And going off what we saw last season, I think it would be a brilliant move still.
Yeah, will it happen? What are you thinking in regards to percentage that it happens?
Well, right now, I think Broja to Everton, I think he's going to have to move from Chelsea unless they don't bring in a striker. But I think that's really kind of unlikely that Chelsea don't do that. So I'm probably going to go with I'll go with 90% that he leaves Chelsea this season. And with Everton, I'll probably go with probably about 65% right now. I do think it's a bit of a tricky deal. I think other teams will be interested in him. So it's one of those right now.
Yeah, I hear that. I hear that.
What are your percentages?
He leaves Chelsea. I'm pretty sure of that. But I don't see him going to Everton. 75% that he leaves Chelsea, and I'm going to say 25% that he goes to Everton.
Okay, that makes 100% then. So 100% that Broja is leaving. We'll move on then. I like this deal. I know you don't know too much about it, Rod, but João Palhinha has left Sporting now, and he's gone to Fulham for around 22 million. For me, I absolutely love this deal. I think he's shone in the Portuguese sort of lineup, and I know he's been linked with loads of fucking clubs over the year, and I think he's around 6'2". A guy who can do a lot in that midfield, and I think this is the sort of signing that. Fulham have come up before and spent money, but I think this is the sort of recognised sort of player that they haven't really signed before, and I'm super excited to see how he gets on in the Premier League. I think this could be one of those moves where he kind of lights it up for Fulham this season and does a great job, and he probably moves on next season to someone who is looking to maybe get into that Europa League sort of spot.
Yeah, I've heard about him. I remember he was a CDM, and I think it was quite highly rated in the Euros, if I remember. And Fulham, obviously, they've got a tendency to come up and almost go straight back down. Marco Silva did very well last year, as always. I mean, Mitrovic scored about 80 million goals, as always, again. And like we've mentioned for previous teams, they need to bolster their squad. They need to have at least 15 players in the matchday squad who could comfortably come on, etc. Or like a 15 decent player match squad. And Palhinha's definitely going to add to their ranks. Obviously, they lost Carvalho to Liverpool. But I think, what was it, about 20 million for Palhinha?
22 million, mate, yeah. I think it's a good price as well. I think, if this was a year or two ago, you'd be looking at maybe 30, 40 million for him. So I think it's a good price. I think in terms of what his physical attributes are, I think they fit the Premier League quite well. And I think it is that sort of signing which they didn't make in the past. I think they maybe would have looked for a flashier sort of option, but I think this is the sort of guy that you need, and if you're looking to stay up in the Premier League. And I'm going to make a bold statement right now. I think they stay up, and I think they stay up pretty handedly. I know I've said this in the past with Fulham, and it's backfired, but I just think you look at the squad they are putting together, and I think it's a pretty tasty one. And, with Mitrovic up front, is this going to be the year that he does finally settle in the Premier League and get a good goal scoring tally? I'm not too sure, but I think they've got enough in their squad to stay up this year.
It's hard to look past their history and the fact that everyone in the Premier League now has basically, they all, bar obviously the 3 new clubs, know how to stay up, know what needs to be done, have got that experience now of a solid year of Premier League football with disruption all over the place, which has definitely added to their experience. But I can't see a world where I like Forest, so my sentiment's quite strong towards Forest. I don't think they go down. Probably being a bit biased, but I just can't.
That is a bit biased.
Yeah. Bournemouth and Fulham don't go straight back down.
I think you're being a bit harsh on them. I think if you look at the players that they do have in their setup, a lot of Premier League experience already compared to that Forest side, which are definitely lacking. So I do think there's a bit of bias on your part there.
There's a lot of
I want Forest to stay up as well, but I actually look at their squad and I think they're lacking quite a lot because, I'm excited to see what Brennan Johnson can do this year for them in the Premier League, but I mean, in all likelihood, it's not going to be much because I think they're going to struggle big time. And it's a bit of a harsh one, but it is what it is.
No, you're completely right. I am being very biased there because I do think Fulham have a better squad than Forest. You're completely right there. So, okay, I'll change it then purely for subjectivity. I can't see a world in where those three clubs don't go back down. But I said it last year with Brentford and they managed to stay up. Yeah. But we've seen it before with Fulham. They've got some half decent players in their squad.
That's a good question, actually.
Doesn't work? Yeah, go on.
Right. Who's got the best squad? Fulham or Leeds?
Right now?
Yeah, it's Fulham.
Are we including Rafinha in it?
Well, no, Rafinha's gone. He's definitely gone. He's going.
Yeah, okay. It's close.
It's not.
I think it is purely because of Leeds have had that experience of 2 years in the Prem now.
Yeah,
I think
but if you look at what sort of players they have and how they've stayed up, you think a lot about Bielsa and getting the most out of players who aren't really good enough. I think you look at Fulham.
Yeah, okay, I'll probably say Fulham have a slightly better squad.
All right, what about Bournemouth?
No, I think Leeds have a better squad than Bournemouth.
Oh, all right. But anyway,
I think Bournemouth are... Scott Parker, he's been in the Prem before. He's gone straight back down. Bournemouth for that team where I was surprised they stayed in the Premier League for so long. I just don't think they have a very good squad, mate.
Fair enough. Let's move on anyway, Rod. We've got two last talking points. The last one, we'll save the one for last, but this one I want to talk about now. Tagliafico potentially moving to Brighton. I think this is signs of Cucurella definitely leaving the club if this one goes through because I think Cucurella to City is a deal which City are really interested in. And I think there's obvious reasons why. But I think Tagliafico would be not only a brilliant backup for him, but I think he might even be not necessarily an upgrade, but I think in what sort of stage of his career he is in, I think it'd be a brilliant signing.
I've got 2 points on this. I think we talked about Tagliafico basically all transfer window. He's meant to come to Villa at one point.
Everyone is.
I hope, because every time Villa sign a 30-year-old, 29-year-old, I get rinsed by my friend who supports Brighton. And obviously Tagliafico turns 30 next month. So I hope they sign him, purely so I can rinse him. Do I think they'll sign him? No, I don't, because I think Brighton have quite a strict policy of going for the younger generation of players, up like top age being like 26. I think he's a good player, Tagliafico. He's got pedigree, he's got huge experience, but I don't think Brighton sign him. But God, I think the front on Cucurella has been quite quiet in the last week or so. I don't really think we've heard much movement.
No, but I do think it's a deal which is going to happen just because I think you look at that City squad, I think they still are going to be active in the market. I think they've made some brilliant signings so far, but I just don't think they're going to go quiet all of a sudden. I think they've still got maybe a move or two left in them. And I think in terms of their system, Cucurella suits it brilliantly. I think maybe defensively lacking a little bit, but it depends on where they want to play him because I think he could do multiple sort of roles for them. And I do see that signing happening. And I think Tagliafico is just a brilliant backup for them. And I mean, for your case, I hope he does sign because I hope you can reach your mates because your mates are batshit crazy. I'm telling you that right now. I was on Twitter the other night and I saw one of your friends saying that fucking Ollie Watkins is going to be like Golden Boot or some sort of shit like
18 goals, he said.
Mate,
I was like,
what shit is he smoking? Ollie Watkins, mate. I told you should sell him as quick as possible. But yeah, go ahead, Rod. Final thoughts on Tagliafico, I guess, because I think it does really tie in with Cucurella quite heavily.
Yeah, I think this move is dependent on whether Cucurella goes or not. It does look like he will go. It has been quiet, like I said. But I don't think Brighton will go in for Tagliafico. I haven't. This is actually the first I've heard of this rumor. I think you managed to find it a bit before we did the show, but I think Brighton go in for someone younger. Their scouts are quite good, but I don't know. I think Cucurella goes City, and I don't think they get Tagliafico.
Okay, fair enough. I think it's definitely, when you kind of break it down, it's a move that makes sense. So I would like to see it happen. I'm not sure if it will, but I would like to see it happen. Final talking point, Rob, before we end this one here. So since the last show, Mo Salah has signed a new contract. It was heavily debated whether it's going to happen, the Liverpool policy. We've seen Mane move on because of, the fact that they weren't willing to give him the money, which he was probably deserving. And I think it was looking like Salah was probably going to leave next season because they weren't going to offer him the money that, once again, that he was probably deserving compared to other players in the Premier League. He's on a 350k contract at Liverpool. A bit of a weird one for me because I think they've been so sort of strong on their stance of we're not giving players crazy money. We're not signing players for crazy money, and they've kind of broke both of those policies in the same season, signing Darwin Núñez for, up to potentially 100 mil. I think it's around 80 mil to start with, and giving Salah a huge contract like this really goes against their sort of, I guess you could say, beliefs, and I find it a bit of a strange one, Rod.
I think Salah is that anomaly where I think you just had to give him a big contract. He's deserved it over the years. He's been outstanding. So I think he is that just odd anomaly where he's played at such a high level and provided for the last 4 or 5 years. I think he deserves the contract. And I do think the only reason he did get this contract mined is because they managed to ship Mane, which they've got a weird strategy. And obviously it's worked for them in recent years. They're businessmen. They know far more about business than I do. But
I don't know, Rod. You've watched quite a few episodes of The Apprentice, so
I think I'm probably on their level then. But I don't know how they go about it in a strange way. I think this does now set the precedent though for Van Dijk, who has also been performing very highly for years. I think he's going to be looking for that. Alisson in recent years is going to probably.
It's that thing, isn't it? It creates that sort of. I don't know what they call it, avalanche sort of effect, where you give it to one, the others are going to come calling as well, and you cannot just give it to one, I don't think. No. And I think this is going to, I don't know, I just don't think it was the right move. I think Salah's been brilliant for him, right? And I think a lot of people talk about, he's irreplaceable, but I actually don't think he is, Rob, because I think you look at what Salah was before he came to Liverpool, I don't think he was anything of the level that he is now. And I think you got to put a lot of that credit down to Jurgen Klopp, and I think, you look at the signings who Jurgen's brought in and the qualities that they've shown, everyone's sort of gone up a level, and I don't think that it's crazy to think that Jurgen could go out and sign someone else and they couldn't, put up numbers, maybe not the same numbers, but numbers which are, not too far off that.
Yeah, it's weird how City can go and give multiple players these huge contracts, as can Chelsea, as can United. And I think this is where Liverpool's model struggles a little bit. They can't as often go and spend all this money on these big players or give these big players contracts. And I mean, that's why Klopp's done a phenomenal job in bringing them to where they are with far less resources compared to City and Chelsea.
I don't think it's necessarily that for me. I think it's not, because they do spend money, and I think there's this kind of, I guess you could say, it's kind of like fake, but they kind of hold themselves at a level because they don't spend money, and I don't think that's the case. I think what's more appealing to me is the fact that they're able to bring in these players and not give them the crazy contracts that other teams are, and they're able to keep them there for their prime years. I think that's what is so impressive for me. Not necessarily the fact that they are able to bring in all these players so cheap, because they don't.
I mean, yeah, it's going to be interesting because obviously now Salah's got this contract. He is the main man at Liverpool, hence why he's going to be first on my team on FPL. They've got Núñez, they've got Diaz, they've got Jota. I think it's a very exciting attack, and it's going to be interesting to see if they can, which I think they will be, obviously, be up there again with City next year. And it's going to be interesting to see who follow them. I was talking to my friend yesterday, and I was imagine I'm talking to a lot of friends. Imagine a 5-way title race or something crazy like that, which we predicted a 3-way title race last year.
Who's going to be in a 5-way?
I was thinking Spurs. Wait, Chelsea, City, Spurs, Liverpool, United.
United, fucking cow.
Mate, I was just coming up with some mad predictions, but I mean, as a football fan, you would just love to see it, but logistically speaking, it's very, very unlikely.
I don't even think it's possible. But yeah,
there's a good chance that each week those teams will be playing each other or whatever. Do you know what I mean? So no, I mean, I'm speaking in the fantasy world here, but
aren't we all?
I'm excited for the season, mate. We're a month away and there's some big signings already in the Premier League, so I'm excited.
I'm super excited as well. Like, I did get towards the end of the season where United really did me in, Rod, and it was like a point of not necessarily that, we're going to lose, so I'm pissed off. It was the point that you had no hope going into the games because you knew that everyone was going to perform really badly and not perform to the level that, you know, is even acceptable. So it really did me in, and I was kind of, you know, dying inside and hoping that the season was going to end. But I'm in a position now where I've definitely got withdrawal symptoms and I need my football fix. So I need it back. Fuck off with all this Nations League bollocks. I think I may have only watched 2 games of Nation League and 4 games in total, or 5 games in total of international football. So I'm pretty proud of myself, and I cannot wait for the start of the Premier League season.
Yeah, I think it's been a much needed break. I've actually enjoyed the break, to be completely honest. I've enjoyed it off FPL. I've enjoyed it off the Premier League. I think ended the end of May, so we've had just over a month off. I have enjoyed it. I'm ready now. Like, I've been watching Villa content with the pre-season training, and it kind of just hypes you up again. And I think the hype is going to continue to build as we get closer to the season, which, like I said, is literally exactly a month away. Although it's disappointing first game. I think it's Crystal Palace. Yeah, it's Crystal Palace Arsenal on a Friday, which, even though on paper it sounds like a disappointing game, it's
always get the first game of the Premier League season. Am I wrong?
Yeah. But it was Brentford Arsenal last year.
I remember Leicester Arsenal.
Regardless, I mean, first game of Premier League season is going to be an interesting one. And
it is.
Yeah, 5th of August, Friday, first game, and we're all for it. And I'm sure we'll talk about some transfers before that.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for joining me once again, Rod. You're away now for 2 weeks of holiday, and when you come back, FPL should be up and running. So as soon as you come back and you're free to sit down for a video, we'll definitely go through our first drafts and kind of talk through why we've selected certain players in terms of, you know, FPL reasons. While you're away, hopefully I can get either one of Jack or Danny on, and we can do that transfer show editions. If not, I might have to do them by myself because you're away for 2 weeks, right?
I am, mate. Wait, I go to London tomorrow, travel on Thursday, so I'll get back on the 22nd.
That's all good, man. So, so
I'll get back and be around just under 2 weeks before the season.
Yeah, that would be sick, man. Anyway, I hope you have a good time. We'll try not to miss you too much, and thanks for joining us once again.
As always, mate, it's a pleasure, and let's hopefully get some nice saucy transfers in the next couple of weeks so we can talk about it.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you guys for watching. As always, if you did enjoy the video, please leave a like. Comment down below letting us which transfer you're most hopeful for in the coming weeks, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the upcoming content. Hopefully we'll have another couple of videos in the next couple of weeks before Rod is back off holiday. I hope he has a good time, and we'll see you later. Take care. Peace.